Hello creatives, I'm back again, and today we are talking about Reedsy versus Fiverr and my experiences finding book publishing professionals on each. So I'm not necessarily going to say which is the better platform to use, period, because I do think that both of them have their place. What I will say is the pros and cons of using each platform, the quirks that I liked about Reedsy over Fiverr, and the quirks I liked about Fiverr over Reedsy. And to kind of begin with that, let me first show you what those websites look like. So for those of you who don't know what Reedsy is a startup that caters to author services. It's based in Europe, and I do have an account with Reedsy. So when you log in, you go to the marketplace, and you have all these different types of marketing services you can do research on. And each of these professionals have to be able to submit at least 5 books that they have worked on. So you need to have a portfolio of at least 5 projects that you've worked on in order to qualify to be on Reedzy's platform and showcase your services and be a professional on here. So you can choose, the search functions are pretty basic. They have an international audience, so they try to use broader terms because there's some nuances between how publishing works across the pond and how the US market is. But in general, you have editing, you have design, you have publicity, marketing, all these different, they have a really good FAQ section, and they have a lot of resources to help you understand the differences between the different types of editing, so you can help figure out what you need for your book. I did an editorial assessment, and then the next step for me, because I'll be doing the developmental edits based on the editorial assessment, after that I'll be moving to copy editing. It's just a lot of really strong resources here that any author should really take a look at. And then they also have some notes for design. They have book cover designers on here, they have marketing professionals on here, and they also have web design offers and services and professionals that are on here as well. So just in general, a lot of really good resources, and not just on the marketplace side of things. They also have what they call Discover, which is a place where, kind of like a Goodreads or a BookBub, which are other tools that you can use, but in terms of for authors, you can find, you can post deals, you can find reviewers, for about $50, I think it is, you can submit your work to be discovered by reviewers, and if you want to earn, some side hustle money doing book reviews, I have a referral link in the description below, so you can sign up to be a book reviewer on Reedsy. So it kind of operates sort of like a social network here. You can post, you can interact with people, really kind of fun community to be involved in. For those of you who don't know what Fiverr is an all-inclusive freelancing platform. So it's not publishing specific. You can find a wide variety of different platforms and niches and industries and professionals on Fiverr selling pretty much anything under the sun. When you go to look at someone, I'm just going to click on someone random here. When you go to see and look up gigs, it'll bring you to their main shtick. They have a couple of photos, or that'll either tell you more about the gig or whatever. They have in-depth descriptions here, and then there's usually a basic, standard, or premium offer. And for publishing, I've noticed that this usually is a word cap, and then you can go down and just kind of see what each version of their packages entails, and again, usually it's a word count that makes the difference. You can contact the seller through Fiverr, and usually like they'll provide you with a quote, and it's pretty straightforward in terms of how to use Fiverr, and just it's a little overwhelming digging through all the different options. Like, you have to really do your research because there's a lot of entries, As you can see here, there's 19,000 services available for marketing for books. You have to do a lot more wading through the trenches, and make sure that your parameters or your search parameters are a little bit tighter. So that's one of the biggest cons of working through Fiverr, is like it just takes a lot of time to vet the professionals. But with that said, let's go over my experience and the pros and cons of each. So now that you have a general overview of what those websites look like, I'll go into the details of which I prefer better, like one over the other, in terms of certain areas of finding a professional. So what I like about Reedsy, I think what Reedsy does really well is providing a platform where they have well-vetted professionals, in terms of finding someone who you know is going to have the experience needed to provide the service that you're looking for. Reedsy does the job. Fiverr, on the other hand, you do have to do some wading through the weeds. There's a lot of people on there with a lot of different skills, and it's a little bit harder. It's like a needle in a haystack. Like, there are very good, competent people on Fiverr. I've had 3 pretty good experiences with working through Fiverr with certain book professionals, but it does take quite a bit of research to find those people, because there's lots of different factors. There's almost too much variety when it comes to finding professionals on Fiverr to hire. Whereas Reedsy, it's very curated. So if you're looking for a more curated experience, feel free to go with Reedsy on that. One thing that I do have to note is that in terms of the actual exchange of information, I find that Fiverr does a little bit better job in terms of helping you communicate with the seller. I feel like the user interface makes more sense and is easier to work with on Fiverr than it is Reedsy, in terms of like negotiating back and forth and just overall finding the conversation and going back to it. There's some UI quirks that comes with Reedsy, so when you're collaborating with the person, it's a little bit hard to find that conversation again. Whereas Fiverr, it's very clearly, like, you have your messages, whereas in Reedsy, there's like 3 different ways you can get back to that conversation. And then in terms of payment, one thing that I ran into as a snag for when I was working with Reedsy was that I wasn't anticipating the fee. So I don't know what it looks like on the back end in terms of the seller, but there is a fee that the writer or the author has to pay in order to use the platform. So I ran into that where I didn't calculate the fee the first time around when I went to go submit the first payment. So I had to transfer some extra money over in order to fix that issue. And I feel so that's a little quirk that I wasn't expecting. With Fiverr, I know that most of the fees are on the seller's end. So with Fiverr, I feel like the experience of making the actual payment is a little bit more clear, a little bit more streamlined. There wasn't as much confusion about like what the payments were, what the payments were going to be, what the timeline was. I wasn't debited, like my account wasn't fully charged until like the deliverable was set. Like as I understand it, Fiverr sets your money aside, and they're like a third party. So that way, if there's any disputes, it can go to either party once the dispute's over. With Reedsy, your money goes to the seller almost immediately. So if there's any disputes, the seller has to be the one to refund you or like give it back if there's a dispute, and assuming that they're going to do that. And in my case, they did do that. I did have to go through and file a dispute, but I think the reason why, even in the handling of the dispute, I do have to say that Reedzy's customer support was very excellent. So because there is a more curated list of professionals on the platform, I think there is a greater pressure for those professionals to adhere to the community rules. So when I needed to reach out to the seller, the customer support for Reedsy was very attentive, was very quick to respond, and I think they helped push the situation to its resolution. So those are kind of, in a nutshell, the key points in my experience with working with Fiverr and Reedsy. It's not that one is better than the other, it's that they both have some quirks that are attached to them, and you have to know how to navigate those quirks. In terms of putting your book together and like going through the motions of like self-publishing your book, I think you're going to end up finding that you have to use both, because Reedsy, it's still fairly new. Like there's a lot of professionals, but not as many as there probably could be, because there's that 5-book rule that is needed for someone to be able to post a profile on the platform. It definitely limits the options. So it's sometimes you can't really find the people that you need. And also another thing is that because it's a European platform, a lot of the professionals are European. There's the American market for this is still very much in development. Whereas Fiverr is a very well established freelancing platform. You can find sellers in your locale fairly easily, or in your country fairly easily. So yeah, again, just pros and cons to each, and understanding how to navigate those nuances. I think in the end you're going to end up having to use both for different reasons. Because I'll be looking for a publicist through Reedsy and through Fiverr and comparing the two, and yeah. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, let me know in the comments below. And if you have any other questions about using Reedsy versus using Fiverr or some other freelance platform, please let me know. If you know of any other tools to help find book publishing professionals, let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear it. So with that said, until next time.